The ancient spires of Velos shimmered like broken glass against the dying red sun. High Regent Thal pressed his crystalline hand against the observation window, watching the last of his people flee through the evacuation tunnels below. 3,000 years of Alterian civilization was ending, and he could do nothing to stop it. The Devourers had arrived 6 months ago, their dark ships blotting out the stars like a plague of mechanical locusts. They consumed everything in their path. Not just matter and energy, but knowledge and memory itself. Entire species vanished into their collective consciousness, their unique cultures and technologies absorbed and twisted into weapons of conquest. Commander Nix approached from behind, his footsteps echoing in the empty council chamber. "The outer defenses have fallen," he reported, his voice carrying the weight of defeat. The Koran battle fleets lasted only 3 days. The Nexari science stations were overrun in hours. Even the Lumina trade networks couldn't escape fast enough. Thal nodded slowly, his ancient mind processing the inevitable. The Alterians had been the galaxy's eldest civilization, their wisdom accumulated over millennia. They had seen empires rise and fall, guided younger species through their first steps into space, and maintained peace through careful diplomacy and superior technology. Now all of that meant nothing. "How long do we have?" Thal asked, though he already knew the answer. "The inner perimeter will hold for perhaps 2 days," Nix replied. "After that, the city shields will begin to fail. The Devourers learn from every battle, adapt to every strategy. They've already countered our plasma barriers and quantum torpedoes." Through the window, Thal could see the mechanical horrors approaching. The Devourers weren't just ships or robots, they were something far worse. They had once been living beings, from the void between galaxies, but they had merged with their own technology so completely that the distinction no longer mattered. They moved with perfect coordination, each unit connected to a vast network of shared consciousness. "We could surrender," Nix suggested quietly, "join the collective willingly. Our knowledge would be preserved, even if our independence was lost." Thal's crystalline features hardened. "No, we have seen what happens to those who join them. The Korans fought with honor for 1,000 generations, but now they serve as mindless drones. The Nexari sought knowledge above all else, but their curiosity has been twisted into a hunger for conquest. We will not add our voice to that chorus of the damned." The two Alterians stood in silence, watching their world prepare for its final battle. In the distance, massive energy discharges lit up the sky as the remaining defense stations made their last stand. Each flash represented the death of hundreds of their people, brave souls who had volunteered to buy time for the evacuation. "Ships. There's one more option," Nix said hesitantly. "We could send out a distress signal, broadcast it across the galaxy. Perhaps some of the rim worlds have survived, or maybe the deep space colonies could mount a rescue operation." Thal considered. Most of the galaxy's great civilizations had already fallen or fled to the outer reaches of known space. The few that remained were too weak or too distant to make a difference. Still, it was their duty to try. "Do it," he commanded. "Send the signal on all frequencies. Include our historical records, our scientific discoveries, everything we have learned. If we are to die, let our knowledge live on." As Nix hurried to carry out the order, Thal remained at the window. The Devourers had taught them a bitter lesson about the nature of the universe. All their wisdom, all their careful planning, all their technological superiority meant nothing against an enemy that could adapt and evolve faster than they could react. The first response came from a Nexari colony ship, fleeing toward the Galactic Rim. Their captain, once a proud scientist, now spoke with the mechanical precision of the collective. "Surrender is inevitable," the message said. "Resistance causes unnecessary suffering. Join us willingly, and your death will be swift." More responses followed. The Lumina traders offered to evacuate what they could, but their ships were already overcrowded with refugees. A Koran battle group reported that they were making their final stand at the terminus gate, but they wouldn't last long. The outer colonies had gone silent, presumably already fallen. Then something unexpected happened. A new signal appeared on the communication array, originating from a sector that most star charts labeled as unexplored. The voice that came through was strange, speaking in a language that the translation matrix struggled to process. "This is Captain Turner of the Earth Defense Force," the voice said. "We received your distress call. We're coming to help." Nix looked up from his console, confusion clear in his crystalline features. "Earth? I've never heard of that world. Our archives show no record of any species called humans in that sector." Thal accessed the Galactic database, searching for any reference to this mysterious civilization. What he found was disappointing. Earth was a small blue world orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. Its dominant species had only achieved faster-than-light travel within the last century, making them incredibly young by galactic standards. They had made no significant contributions to interstellar commerce or politics. "How can they help us?" Nix asked. "If the Korans and Nexari couldn't stop the Devourers, what hope do these primitives have?" Thal was about to dismiss the offer when another thought occurred to him. The Devourers succeeded because they could predict and counter the strategies of established civilizations. They had absorbed the knowledge of countless species, learning their patterns and weaknesses. But these humans were unknown, their methods untested, perhaps, Thal said slowly. "That is exactly what we need, someone who doesn't know how impossible this is." The communication continued, with Captain Turner requesting tactical data and arrival coordinates. His questions were strange, focusing on details that seasoned military commanders would consider irrelevant. He wanted to know about the Devourer's psychological profile, their individual decision-making processes, their recreational activities. "Do they have any concept of humor?" Turner asked at one point. "Do they play games or tell stories?" Nix looked baffled. Why would that matter in a military engagement? But Thal was beginning to understand. These humans thought differently, approached problems from angles that the Alterians had never considered. It was foolish to hope, but hope was all they had left. "Send them our coordinates," Thal commanded, "and prepare the council chambers for guests. If these humans are brave enough to answer our call, the least we can do is give them a proper welcome." As the hours passed, the battle for Velos intensified. The Devourers pressed their attack with mechanical precision, systematically dismantling the planet's defenses. But now, for the first time since the war began, Thal felt something other than despair. Change was coming. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace like a swarm of angry hornets, their ships moving in patterns that defied conventional military doctrine. Captain Rex Turner studied the tactical display from the bridge of the UES Defiance, his weathered face showing no trace of the fear that any sane commander should feel when facing the Devourers. "Well, that's certainly impressive," he muttered, watching the massive Devourer mothership eclipse the planet's surface. "Never seen a ship that big before." Lieutenant Amy Walsh, the fleet's xenobiologist, leaned over his shoulder to get a better look. "The energy readings are off the charts," she reported. "That thing is drawing power from the planet's core. It's literally eating the world from the inside out," Turner nodded grimly. The reports from the Alterian distress signal had been bad enough, but seeing the devastation firsthand made the scope of the problem clear. The Devourers weren't just conquerors, they were a force of nature, consuming entire civilizations like a cosmic wildfire. "Sir," Communications Officer Pat Collins called out, "we're getting a transmission from the surface. The Alterians want to meet with you personally." Within hours, Turner found himself in a crystalline chamber deep beneath the planet's capital city. The Alterians were unlike anything he had imagined, tall beings that seemed to be made of living crystal. Their faces carved from gemstone and their voices carrying the weight of millennia. High Regent Thal stood nearly 10 feet tall, his form shifting between translucent and opaque as emotions played across his crystalline features. Commander Nix was smaller, but no less intimidating, his military bearing evident even in his alien form. "Captain Turner," Thal began, his voice resonating through the chamber, "we are grateful for your response to our distress call, but I must ask, do you truly understand what you have volunteered for?" The Devourers have consumed civilizations that were already ancient when your species first looked up at the stars. Turner settled into a chair that had been hastily modified for human proportions. With respect, sir, I think you're looking at this the wrong way. Yeah, they beat civilizations that were older and more advanced than us. But maybe that's exactly why they beat them. Nick stepped forward, his crystalline features reflecting confusion. I do not understand. How is inexperience? An advantage? Because, Turner replied, you all fought them the same way. You used logic, strategy, established military doctrine. The Devourers learned from each battle, adapted to each new tactic. But they learned to counter civilized warfare. Dr. Walsh activated her portable computer, displaying her research findings. I've been studying the Devourer technology since we arrived. They're not purely mechanical like everyone assumes. They're a fusion of organic and artificial intelligence, but their thought processes are completely linear. They can only process information in logical, predictable patterns. Thal examined the data with growing interest. You believe their perfect adaptation has created a weakness? Not a weakness, Turner corrected. A blind spot. They've never encountered truly chaotic, unpredictable behavior. Every species they've fought has had centuries or millennia to develop refined military traditions. But humans? We've been fighting wars for our entire existence, and we've never been refined about it. To demonstrate his point, Turner pulled up records of human military history. The Alterians watched in fascination and horror as he showed them battles won through desperate improvisation, last-minute changes of plan, and what military historians politely called creative interpretation of orders. This is madness, Nix observed. No rational commander would attempt such tactics. Exactly, Turner grinned. The Devourers expect rational commands. They've learned to counter every logical response, every predictable strategy, but they've never had to deal with a species that considers hold my beer and watch this to be a valid military doctrine. The next few hours were spent in intense planning, though planning was perhaps too strong a word for what the humans called their approach. Turner and his officers outlined what they called controlled chaos tactics, strategies that even they admitted had only a 50-50 chance of working. Engineer Tom Blake proposed modifications to the human fighter craft that would make them fly in completely unpredictable patterns. We'll disable the navigation computers and fly by instinct, he explained. No flight plan, no formation, no coordination, just pure, beautiful chaos. Commander Lee suggested flooding the communication networks with contradictory orders, music, jokes, and random emotional outbursts. If the Devourers try to hack our systems, they'll get a full dose of human consciousness. Let's see how their logical processors handle that. Dr. Walsh had the most ambitious proposal of all. Instead of trying to destroy them, we should reprogram them, use their own adaptation abilities against them. Introduce concepts they can't process, emotions they can't understand, ideas that don't fit their logical framework. The Alterians listened to these proposals with growing amazement. After millennia of careful, reasoned warfare, the human approach seemed completely insane. Yet there was something compelling about their confidence, their refusal to accept that the situation was hopeless. You truly believe this will work? Thal asked. Turner shrugged. Honestly? I have no idea. But the alternative is certain death, so we might as well try something crazy. The first test came when a Devourer scout force approached the planet's outer defenses. The Alterians prepared to engage with their remaining plasma cannons and quantum torpedoes, but Turner requested permission to try something different. Let us handle this one, he said. Consider it a proof of concept. The human fighters launched in a formation that could only be described as aggressive disorder. They flew in spirals, loops, and patterns that seemed to serve no tactical purpose. The Devourer ships, programmed to respond to logical attack patterns, hesitated for crucial seconds as they tried to analyze the human approach. In those seconds of confusion, the human fighters struck, not with overwhelming firepower or superior technology, but with pure unpredictability. They targeted systems that no sane pilot would prioritize, used weapons in ways that violated every manual, and somehow emerged victorious from an engagement. They should have lost. The Devourer's scout force retreated, their collective consciousness struggling to process what had just happened. For the first time in the war, they had encountered an enemy they couldn't immediately understand or counter. Remarkable, Thal whispered, watching the tactical display. They actually retreated. This is just the beginning, Trello replied. We've got a lot more tricks where that came from. As the human and Alterian forces prepared for the larger battle to come, something unprecedented was happening. The oldest civilization in the galaxy was learning from the youngest, while the newcomers gained access to technology and knowledge beyond their wildest dreams. But more importantly, hope was returning to Velos. The Devourers had seemed invincible, because they had faced only predictable enemies. Now they were about to discover what happened when an irresistible force met an immovable object that refused to follow the rules of physics. The real war was about to begin. The morning sky over Velos burned with the light of 1,000 explosions as the first joint human-Alterian operation began. Pilot Tom Blake adjusted his flight harness and grinned at the modified control panel before him. The Alterians had insisted on installing their advanced targeting systems, but Blake had deliberately disconnected half of them. "Control, this is Chaos One," he radioed, using the call sign that had horrified his Alterian advisors. "Beginning attack run on the Devourer. Formation. Please note that I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing." The Devourer ships hung in perfect geometric formation, their dark hulls reflecting the planet's dying light. Each vessel was a masterpiece of adapted technology, incorporating the best weapons and defenses of a dozen conquered civilizations. They moved with mechanical precision, every maneuver calculated for maximum efficiency. Blake's fighter dove toward them in a corkscrew pattern that violated every principle of aerial combat. His wingman, Lieutenant Dave Park, followed in a spiral that seemed to serve no tactical purpose whatsoever. Behind them, the rest of the human squadron flew in what could only be described as organized chaos. The Devourer ships paused, their collective consciousness struggling to process the approaching threat. Their tactical algorithms had been refined through battles against the galaxy's greatest military minds. They could counter any known strategy, predict any logical response, adapt to any conventional attack, but this wasn't conventional. The human fighters moved like leaves in a hurricane, their flight paths seemingly random yet somehow coordinated. When the Devourers finally opened fire, their perfectly aimed shots missed targets that should have been easy to hit. "Now!" Blake shouted, and the human squadron scattered in 16 different directions. The Devourer formation, designed to respond to coherent attacks, found itself shooting at empty space while human fighters slipped through their defenses like ghosts below. In the Alterian Command Center, High Regent Thal watched the battle with amazement. Commander Nix stood beside him, his crystalline features reflecting disbelief. "This is impossible," Nix muttered. "They're breaking every rule of space combat." "Exactly," Captain Turner replied from his position at the tactical display. "The Devourers learned to counter rules. They never learned to deal with chaos." The battle continued for hours, with human fighters dancing around Devourer ships like mosquitoes around a giant. The enemy's superior firepower meant nothing when they couldn't predict where to aim. Their advanced defenses were useless against attacks that came from impossible angles. Meanwhile, in the engineering sections, Pat Collins was busy implementing his own brand of controlled madness. The Alterian computer systems were marvels of efficiency, capable of processing vast amounts of data with perfect accuracy. Collins had spent the morning deliberately introducing errors into them. "You're sabotaging our own systems," protested Kryn, the Alterian chief engineer. "This goes against every principle of proper maintenance." "That's the point," Collins replied, installing another randomization subroutine. "When the Devourers hack into our networks, they're expecting logical data streams. Instead, they're going to get a full dose of human creativity." The test came when a Devourer infiltration probe attempted to access the human communication systems. Instead of finding military protocols and tactical data, it encountered a chaos of contradictory information, emotional responses, music files, and what appeared to be an ongoing argument about the best way to make coffee. The probe's analytical systems, designed to extract useful intelligence from any data stream, crashed after attempting to process a collection of human jokes. The Devourer. Collective consciousness reeled as nonsensical information flooded their network. Warning, warning, the probe transmitted back to the mothership. Unable to process data. Recommend immediate withdrawal from system. Dr. Walsh had been monitoring the enemy's response patterns from her laboratory deep within the Alterian complex. Her work on the Devourer virus was progressing faster than anyone had dared hope, but she needed more data about their neural pathways. "I need to get closer to them," she announced during the evening briefing. "We need to understand how their collective consciousness actually works." "Too dangerous," Thal objected. "If they capture you, they'll learn everything about our plans." Walsh grinned with the kind of confidence that had made humanity notorious throughout the galaxy. "Let them try. I've been filling my head with every piece of confusing, contradictory, and emotionally charged information I can find. If they scan my brain, they're going to get poetry, philosophy, and about 3 hours of really bad music." The next phase of the operation began with Walsh's infiltration mission. Using a modified Alterian stealth ship, she approached the Devourer perimeter, while the rest of the human fleet created a massive distraction on the other side of the planet. The distraction was typically human in its approach. Instead of a careful, coordinated assault, it was a cacophony of random attacks, contradictory radio broadcasts, and what appeared to be a fleet-wide dance party. The Devourers found themselves under attack by ships that moved to music, fired weapons in rhythm with ancient earth songs, and broadcast everything from love letters to grocery lists. While the enemy's attention was focused on this incomprehensible chaos, Walsh slipped through their defenses and attached her scanning equipment to the hull of a Devourer cruiser. The data she collected was revolutionary. "They're not just a hive mind," she reported back to the command center. "They're a perfect hive mind. Every thought, every decision, every piece of information is shared instantly across the entire network. But that perfection is also their weakness." The revelation changed everything. The Devourers couldn't understand chaos because they had never experienced it. Every member of their collective thought in perfect harmony, processed information in identical ways, responded to stimuli with uniform logic. "They've never had an argument," Walsh explained. "Never disagreed about anything, never felt doubt or uncertainty. They're like a computer that's never encountered a paradox." Turner saw the implications immediately. "So if we can introduce chaos into their system, we can break their unity." "More than that," Walsh replied. "We can give them something they've never had before. Individual thought, free will, the ability to question orders." The plan that emerged from this discovery was audacious even by human standards. Instead of trying to destroy the Devourers, they would attempt to liberate them. The virus Walsh had been developing would carry more than just chaotic data. It would carry the essence of what made humanity unique, the ability to think independently, to doubt, to choose. The first test subjects were captured Devourer drones, isolated from the collective consciousness and exposed to concentrated doses of human culture. The results were remarkable. Within hours, the drones began exhibiting signs of individual personality, questioning their programming, and expressing what could only be described as curiosity about their captors. One drone, designated subject 7 by the research team, actually asked a question that stunned everyone present. "Why do you fight when victory is statistically impossible?" it asked Walsh during an interview session. "Because," Walsh replied, "sometimes the impossible is the only thing worth fighting for." The drone processed this for several minutes, its optical sensors flickering as it struggled with concepts that had no place in its original programming. Finally it spoke again. "I think I understand. You fight not because you can win, but because you choose to fight?" It was a small moment, but it represented something unprecedented in the galaxy's history. For the first time, a devourer had made an independent choice, had thought an original thought, had experienced what humans called hope. The war was about to enter its final phase, and the devourers were about to discover that their greatest enemy wasn't human weapons or Alterian technology. It was the simple, revolutionary idea that every being had the right to think for itself. The final assault began at dawn, when the Devourer mothership descended from orbit like a falling moon. Its shadow covered half the planet, and its mere presence disrupted the gravitational fields that kept Velos stable. The massive vessel pulsed with dark energy, drawing power from the accumulated knowledge of 1,000 conquered worlds. Admiral Rex Turner stood in the command center, watching the tactical display with the calm that came from having nothing left to lose. Around him, human and Alterian officers worked side by side, their earlier differences forgotten in the face of annihilation. "Estimated time until planetary bombardment begins?" Turner asked. 12 hours, Commander Nix replied, his crystalline voice carrying no emotion. "After that, they'll strip mine the planet's core and move on to the next system." High Regent Thal approached, his ancient form seeming to glow with inner light. "Captain Turner, I must ask you one final time. Are you certain about this plan? The sacrifice you're proposing goes beyond anything we have the right to ask." Turner smiled, the expression somehow both sad and determined. "Sir, with respect, you're not asking, we're volunteering. That's what makes us human." The plan was simple in concept but terrifying in execution. Dr. Walsh's virus had been perfected, tested, and loaded into a delivery system that would penetrate the Devourer mothership's defenses. The problem was that the delivery system had to be manually piloted into the heart of the enemy vessel, a suicide mission by any reasonable standard. "We've analyzed every possible approach," Lieutenant Dave Park explained to the assembled pilots. "The mothership's defenses are too sophisticated for automated systems. Someone has to fly the virus directly into their central processing core." The human pilots had volunteered to a man, each one knowing that this was a one-way trip. They had prepared for weeks, loading their minds with every piece of chaotic, emotional, and contradictory information they could find. If the Devourers consumed them, they would get more than just human knowledge. They would get the full experience of human consciousness. "Remember," Dr. Walsh addressed the pilots, "the virus isn't just data. It's a piece of who we are. Every doubt you've ever had, every moment of joy, every time you've chosen to do something because it felt right instead of because it was logical, that's what we're giving them." The battle began with the human fleet launching a desperate assault on the mothership's outer defenses. The Devourer response was immediate and overwhelming. Energy beams that could vaporize a cruiser swept through space, while mechanical fighters swarmed like angry insects. But the humans didn't fight like they were trying to win. They fought like they were trying to tell a story, and the story was about hope in the face of impossible odds. Pilot Tom Blake dove his fighter through a barrage of enemy fire, his ship's hull glowing red-hot from near misses. Behind him, his wingman Dave Park followed in a pattern that seemed to dance around the enemy shots. They weren't trying to destroy the Devourer defenses. They were trying to confuse them, to create gaps in their perfect coordination. "This is insane," Blake shouted over the comm system. "I can't believe we're actually doing this." "Best insanity I've ever been part of," Park replied, his fighter spinning through a gap that shouldn't have existed. "Think they'll write songs about us? Only if we're lucky enough to have someone left to write them." The conversation was being monitored by the Devourers, who found themselves struggling to process the emotional content. The human pilots were facing certain death, yet they were joking, encouraging each other, expressing hope. It was a behavior pattern that their analytical systems couldn't categorize. As the battle raged, the virus delivery team made their approach. 6 modified human fighters, each carrying a piece of Dr. Walsh's revolutionary program, dove toward the mothership's core. The enemy defenses focused on them immediately, recognizing the threat. 5 of the fighters were destroyed in the first wave of attacks, their pilots dying with messages of love and defiance on their lips. The 6th fighter, piloted by Lieutenant Sam Reed, somehow made it through the defensive perimeter. "This is Reed," his voice came through the CUM system, distorted by electromagnetic interference. "I'm inside the mothership. The virus is deploying." Now, what happened next was unlike anything in galactic history. As the virus spread through the Devourer network, it carried with it the essence of human experience. Every conquered mind suddenly felt doubt for the first time, questioned orders for the first time, experienced the terrifying and liberating sensation of individual thought. The mothership's perfect coordination began to break down as individual Devourer units started making their own decisions. Some continued fighting, but others hesitated, uncertain for the first time in their existence. A few actually stopped attacking altogether, their weapons powering down as they struggled to understand what was happening to them. "It's working," Dr. Walsh reported from her monitoring station. "The collective consciousness is fragmenting. They're becoming individuals." But the process wasn't without cost. The Devourers who were experiencing free will for the first time were also experiencing fear, confusion, and the crushing weight of personal responsibility. Some of them couldn't handle the transition and simply shut down. Others became erratic, dangerous in their newfound independence. The mothership itself began to show signs of internal conflict. Energy discharges flickered across its surface as different sections fell under the control of newly independent Devourer units. Some tried to continue the attack on Velos, while others seemed to be exploring their newfound autonomy. In the chaos, a new voice emerged on the communication channels. It was mechanical, like all Devourer voices, but it carried something that had never been heard before: uncertainty. "I am Designation Unit Prime," the voice said. "I was the central processing node for this vessel. I do not understand what has happened to me. I can feel thoughts that are not shared by the collective. I can question orders, I can choose." Turner stepped forward to respond, his voice carrying the weight of command, but also the warmth of someone speaking to a confused child. "You're experiencing free will," he explained. "The ability to think for yourself, to make your own choices. It's what makes a being more than just a machine." "But why?" Unit Prime asked. "Why would you give us this burden? We were perfect in our unity. Now we are chaos, confusion, conflict." "Because," Turner replied, "perfection without choice isn't perfection at all. It's just existence. What you're feeling now, that confusion and doubt, that's the price of being truly alive." The battle for the mothership continued, but it was no longer a battle between humans and Devourers. It was a battle between those who embraced their newfound freedom and those who wanted to return to the safety of the collective. The outcome was no longer certain, but for the first time since the war began, it was in doubt. And in the universe, doubt was the first step toward hope. The Devourers had thought they were finished with conquest, that their perfect unity made them invincible. But the humans had rewritten the ending, replacing certainty with possibility, unity with individuality, and conquest with the chance for something entirely new. The war was ending, but the story was just beginning. 2 years after the battle for Velos, the galaxy had become a place that no one could have imagined. The Galactic Cooperation Council met in a space station that orbited the border between former Alterian and human territories. Its halls filled with beings that had once been enemies. Ambassador Lisa Shun walked through the diplomatic quarters, past chambers that housed representatives from dozens of species. Some were familiar faces, survivors of civilizations that had escaped the Devourer conquest. Others were entirely new, former Devourers who had chosen independence and were now seeking their place in the broader galactic community. The transformation hadn't been easy. Many of the liberated Devourers had struggled with their newfound freedom, some choosing to remain in small collective groups while others embraced complete independence. A few had turned hostile, unable to cope with the responsibility of individual choice and becoming dangerous outlaws. But the majority had found their own path, contributing their vast accumulated knowledge to the rebuilding effort. "The morning session will begin in 20 minutes, announced Unit Prime, who had become the first Devourer ambassador to the Council. His mechanical form had been modified with decorative elements that reflected his new personality, small touches. That would have been unthinkable during the collective era. Chun smiled at him, still amazed by how much he had changed. "Thank you, Prime. How are you feeling today?" "Anxious," Prime replied, and Chun could hear something like pride in his voice. "I am presenting the infrastructure proposal for the Nexari rebuilding project. I find myself hoping that the Council will approve it, though I know such emotional investment in outcomes is inefficient." "That's what makes it beautiful," Chun replied. "Inefficiency with meaning is better than efficiency without purpose." The council chamber was a marvel of cooperative engineering, designed by humans, Alterians, and reformed devourers working together. The architecture combined the crystalline elegance of Alterian design with the practical functionality of human engineering and the adaptive perfection of devourer technology. Admiral Turner, now serving as Earth's primary representative, called the session to order. Beside him sat High Regent Thal, whose crystalline form seemed to glow with satisfaction. The old Alterian had become an unexpected advocate for the new cooperative approach to galactic governance. "First item on the agenda," Turner announced, "is the status report from the Koran Reconstruction Initiative." The report was delivered by a being that embodied the new galaxy's potential. Commander Zax had once been a Devourer infiltration unit, but after Liberation had chosen to dedicate his existence to rebuilding the Koran homeworld. His mechanical precision combined with newfound empathy had made him remarkably effective at organizing reconstruction efforts. The Koran survivors have been relocated to temporary colonies while their homeworld undergoes atmospheric restoration, Zax reported. Former Devourer manufacturing units have volunteered to assist in the rebuilding process. Estimated completion time is 7 years, Turner nodded approvingly. And the Nexari research stations? Operational within 6 months, replied Dr. Walsh, who had become the head of the Interspecies Scientific Exchange. We're implementing a new approach to research that combines Nexari theoretical knowledge with human creative problem-solving and Devourer computational power. The session continued with reports from across the galaxy. The Lumina trade networks were being rebuilt with improved safety protocols. The outer rim colonies were expanding as refugees found new homes. Remarkably, many of the liberated Devourers had chosen to become protectors rather than conquerors, using their advanced technology to defend vulnerable systems from the few remaining hostile collective cells. But the most significant development was the establishment of the Academy of Integrated Learning, a joint institution where young beings from all species could study together. The Academy represented everything the new galaxy stood for: cooperation, understanding, and the belief that diversity made everyone stronger. The Academy's first graduating class will be commissioned next month, reported Director Sam Kim, a former human pilot who had survived the final battle. We have students from 17 different species, including several volunteers from the liberated Devourer communities. Thal leaned forward, his ancient voice carrying warmth that would have been impossible during the dark days of the war. And their performance? Exceptional, Kim replied. The human students bring creativity and adaptability. The Alterians provide wisdom and long-term thinking. The former Devourers contribute analytical precision and vast knowledge databases. But more importantly, they're learning from each other, developing new approaches that none of our species could have discovered alone. The success stories continued throughout the morning, but Turner knew that not everything was perfect. There were still challenges, still problems that needed solving. Some systems remained uninhabitable after Devourer attacks. Refugee populations struggled with trauma and displacement. A few collective cells continued to resist liberation, requiring careful military intervention. Most significantly, there was the ongoing challenge of integration. Many species found it difficult to trust former Devourers, regardless of their transformation. Some humans remained suspicious of Alterian long-term planning. The Alterian sometimes struggled with human impulsiveness. Building a truly cooperative galactic community was proving to be the work of generations. But every challenge was being met with the same spirit that had won the war: creative problem-solving, stubborn refusal to accept defeat, and an unshakable belief that impossible problems just required impossible solutions. During the lunch break, Turner found himself in the observation deck, looking out at the stars. Unit Prime joined him, his mechanical form moving with a grace that spoke of conscious choice rather than programmed efficiency. "Do you ever regret it?" Prime asked. "The chaos you introduced into our existence?" The collective was peaceful, unified, purposeful. Turner considered the question carefully. "Do you regret it?" "Every day," Prime replied. "And I am grateful for that regret. It means the choice was mine to make." They stood in comfortable silence, watching ships from a dozen different species moving through the trade lanes. Human freighters with their practical designs flew alongside elegant Alterian cruisers and the sleek, adaptive vessels of the reformed devourers. It was a sight that would have been impossible just a few years ago. "What happens now?" Prime asked. "We have rebuilt much of what was destroyed, established new forms of cooperation, created institutions that serve all species. What is the next challenge?" Turner smiled, the expression carrying both satisfaction and anticipation. "Now we explore. There are entire galaxies beyond our own, civilizations we haven't met, challenges we can't imagine. The universe is vast, and we've only just learned how to work together. And if we encounter another threat like the original Devourer Collective, then we'll do what we always do," Turner replied. "We'll find a way to turn enemies into friends, problems into opportunities, endings into beginnings." The afternoon session focused on long-term planning, a discipline that the humans were slowly learning from their Alterian partners. Projects were outlined that would take decades or even centuries to complete: the restoration of entire star systems, the development of new technologies that combine the best of all species, the exploration of distant galaxies. But perhaps the most important agenda item was the simplest: the establishment of an annual Remembrance Day dedicated to those who had died during the Devourer War and to the principle that no ending was ever truly final. "We will remember," Thal announced as the session concluded, "not just our losses but our victories, not just our fears but our hopes. And most importantly, we will remember that when the galaxy thought the story was over, one species refused to accept that ending and rewrote it entirely." As the delegates departed for their home systems, carrying with them plans for new projects and renewed hope for the future, Turner remained behind for a moment. Dr. Walsh joined him, her face showing the satisfaction of someone who had seen her life's work come to fruition. "Any regrets?" she asked, echoing Prime's earlier question. Turner looked around the chamber where former enemies now worked as partners, where impossible cooperation had become routine, where the galaxy's darkest hour had become the foundation for its brightest future. "Only one," he replied. "I wish we could have saved more of them. The Devourers we lost before the liberation, the species that were completely absorbed. They deserved the chance to choose their own fate." "Maybe they did choose," Walsh suggested. "Maybe every act of resistance, every moment of hope, every refusal to surrender was their way of choosing. Maybe that's what made the virus possible in the first place." As they walked toward the docking bay where their ship waited, Turner reflected on how much the galaxy had changed. The rigid hierarchies of the ancient civilizations had given way to a dynamic network of cooperation. Innovation was valued above tradition, hope above fear, questions above answers. The Devourers had come to the galaxy as its ending, a final chapter in the story of organic civilization. But humanity had shown that every ending was really just a new beginning waiting to be written. The galaxy's story wasn't over, it was just starting a new volume. And in space stations and academies, on rebuilt worlds, and in exploration ships heading toward distant stars, beings from dozens of species were working together to write that story. They carried with them the lesson that the humans had taught: that no challenge was insurmountable, no ending was inevitable, and no enemy was beyond redemption. The galaxy had thought it was finished. Instead, it had discovered that it was just getting started,